Thank you all for coming. Number one, I think I've met pretty much everybody's been here before, but if not, I'm Ken King. I'm your state representative. Been your state representative since 2013 was my first session. Today I have my wife with me. She's never been to Muleshoe. Right. Other than knocking doors, she has never been to a meeting. I think you all know Cinda by now. Cinda's our district director. Our district office is in Pampa, where Cinda lives. Before we get too far into what happened in the 87th legislative session, I think the most important thing you should all know is redistricting was a huge success for rural Texas. And the reason it was a huge success, in 2011, the last time the map was drawn, the census required us to have 160,000 people to create House District 88, which is what we're in today. Fast forward 10 years, we have about 140,000 people. And the new census required us to have close to 200,000 to make a district. In fact, west of 35, there's 14 members, not counting El Paso delegation, and we had enough population for 12. And we saved all 14 members. We didn't lose a seat west of 35. It was a big deal.
That's huge.
And it was largely because our West Texas delegation cooperates so well together. And I don't think we're going to pass these maps around, but you can see what the new House District 88 looks like. This is purple. And, I gave up the county. I had to give up 4 counties that are all a lot closer to me than you are. But I was proud that we got to say Bailey County within the district. When we got ready to draw the map, the chair of redistricting in the House is from Corpus Christi, and there was infighting all over. It's funny how people that I've watched be close friends for a decade are no longer friends anymore over that map. You know, you stole my county, or I didn't want this county, or whatever. Well, the West Texas guys didn't act that way, and so the chair said, if y'all draw your map first and give it to us, we'll draw the map from the Panhandle down instead of the Metroplex out. And that's what we did. We were the first delegation to have a map in to the chairman, and it worked. It worked amazingly. I couldn't be prouder of our group and how redistricting went. As far as the 87th legislative session, it was certainly different than anything I've ever been through. You know, nobody in living memory has been through a 100-year pandemic in a legislative cycle. So you know, that was certainly a challenge. You know, we got there on opening day. Robin didn't even get to go to the floor with me. My kids didn't get to come down. Typical opening day, we get there at 8 in the morning. You know, we don't even get out of the Capitol till 5 or 6 at night, and it's just a mob of people. We were done and walking our dog around town lake by 11. There was nobody there. The whole place was just shut down. It was just a tomb. So you imagine there's 181 of us that were allowed in, plus our staffs, and everybody's got masks on, and there's plexiglass everywhere, and everybody's supposedly social distancing, and everybody that comes to the people's house, so we can conduct the people's business, the people weren't allowed in. It was crazy. So there was nobody to talk about legislation with, or to prepare for legislative session. And remember, the way your session works is the first 60 days you don't hear bills. So the first 60 days is when we meet with our constituents. It's when we set up committees. It's when we prepare legislation to go through the process. None of that happened. So the first thing that really sucked the oxygen out of the room for a normal session was the billions and billions of dollars coming down from the federal government that had to be spent in certain ways and had to be spent by certain times. And so that was the first thing. Everything that we normally would have called a priority in a legislative session went out the window, first because of COVID. Second thing that happened was Winter Storm Uri. Winter Storm Uri didn't affect anyone in this room from a power grid standpoint because we're in the Southwest Power Pool, we're not part of ERCOT. But I think the state needs to understand just how close we got to losing the entire power grid that represents 75% of Texas. The experts testified that we came within 4 minutes of the entire grid going down, going offline. Now, the ramifications of that, nobody knows, because the experts also said it's never been offline. Since the time there was electricity, it's never shut down. So if we shut it down now, how do you get it back up? I mean, there's a lot of evidence out there that suggests Dallas, Houston, San Antonio would still be out of electricity. And it's a good time to live where we live. get out of that mess. So that was the second thing. You know, we had to address all the reasons that happened, all the reasons that the grid went down, from lack of communications between agencies, having non-Texans representing the highest levels of authority in this. You know, where did the government fail? Where did the infrastructure fail? Was it the fault of the renewables? Was it the natural gas supply? What was it that caused all that? So there was tons of legislation that went into that had to get done before the 140 days was up. And I'll get into some other specific things. That isn't all we did. I'm just saying that for what you would expect of a normal session, those two things just drain the energy, first and foremost. So most of you probably saw that we got to stay 10 months this time. We were there until almost the end of October, and we had 3 called sessions. The reason we had 3 called sessions was the Democrats walked out in the House. You have to have 100 members on the floor, 2/3, to have a quorum to conduct state business. On the House floor, we have 86 Republicans. Do the math. It didn't take long before we could no longer have a quorum. And why did they walk out? 2 things. First thing is what the Democrat Party referred to as the voter suppression bill. Republicans called it voter integrity. It had nothing to do with fraud, had nothing to do with voter suppression. What it had to do with, Harris County created its own voting law during the last presidential election. Nobody's saying Donald Trump didn't win Texas. Nobody says that the Democrats stole the election. We're still a red state. Donald Trump won Texas. But what the Democrats of Harris County did is they violated the U.S. Constitution that clearly gives state legislatures the authority to create election law. There is no way that it's proper that Harris County has different election standards than Bailey County. That's what the bill was about. And so when I tell people that, sometimes I hear, okay, why was it 47 pages long? Well, fun fact about your Constitution in Texas. Anytime you change statute in Texas, you can't just say this affects subchapter J of page F or whatever. You have to spell out the subchapter that it affects. Well, if you're ever bored and want some fun reading material, the election code is worse than the education code. So anyway, that's why the bill was so long. That's what the bill did. There was nobody saying there was fraud. There was nothing else. Harris County violated the Constitution, or there wouldn't be a need for the bill. Democrats got their 15 minutes of fame as saying it was suppression. It was not. Second thing, which is I'm hoping I'm getting better at explaining this because it's not a subject I was familiar with. Second, the reason the Democrats walked out was the transgender student athlete issue. Now, the first bill that came to the Public Education Committee, the crux of the bill said that a student had to play on the sports team that their biological birth certificate identified with. That's what it said. The House sponsor brings it to the Public Ed Committee. I think that hearing was about 14 hours. We got through it. The vote, it did not have the votes to get out of committee. So, the second thing that happened, the Senate bill comes over. Well, the way a committee works is the chair of the committee owns whatever bill is in that committee. So the author has nothing to say about it. So that, the chair can change it, they can throw it away, they can hear it, they can refuse to hear it, they can do anything they want to with it, including change the House sponsor. So the Senate sends the bill over, it gets in the House. The guy that had it was the House sponsor. We'd already heard his bill, he didn't have the votes. The chair of the committee put my name on the bill. So now I'm the Senate sponsor. Senate Bill 29, or the House sponsor, Senate Bill 29. So I knew it didn't have the votes the way it was written. So I thought, common sense approach, let's find out what UIL is doing now, if this is a problem. So I called UIL. And the answer was, when I said, how many kids are we talking about? How many transgender students do we have trying to play on sports teams? 1,200 school districts, got 5.5 million kids. How many we got? They said, maybe 10. I said, 10? I said, maybe not 10, but no more than 10, just 10. So, okay, so what do you do about it? Well, the answer was, hey, there's a big list of rules and things these people have to go through to play on the sports team. And it's, I don't know a better way to explain it, but it's not, Tommy doesn't get to beat Tammy to win the 100-yard dash. That's not how that works. That child has to be going through a biological or chemical makeup change. Blood tests have to be submitted to UIL. They have to be under a doctor's care. The parents have to have signed off on it. But by the time the trans child can play in that sport under the old UIL rules, that child would have to show the same chemical makeup as a biological girl of that age. So it wasn't just a free for all, and this is how UIL was handling it. So what I said, okay, let's do this. Let's codify UIL's rule and make it law. Second thing, let's force UIL to give us a comprehensive study. I think it's personally wrong to set policy when we think it's 10 kids. Shouldn't we know if we're going to actually pass a bill that impacts a child, even one child's life? Shouldn't we know? So I said, let's do a study. And then the third thing the bill did, when I got done with it, is it put a sunset date on the legislation which would force UIL to do the study by the time the next legislative session comes around. That's the bill I got out of committee. Democrats walked out over it. They called me all kinds of horrible names and everything, and accused me of doing something to a child. I never knew exactly what it was, and my opinion of that is, not just as your state representative, but as a dad of a female athlete who doesn't want to have to play with boys on her team for any reason. She deserves representation as much as a kid that's trying to transgender or transition into something else. So I'm allowed to represent kids that don't like this too, right? So I fought hard for this. That's why the Democrats walked out. So when they came back after 50 days of doing nothing and leaving all the Republican delegation down there, and I had to stay the entire 50 days because we're so close to having a quorum, you didn't want to be the only Republican that was missing in action the day we can start business. And living in Canadian, it's a little tough to get to Austin, as you well know. So when they finally did come back, first we took up the voter integrity bill. They did not get one amendment put on that bill. They did not change the legislation at all. They lost their entire ability to negotiate for their constituents. Then the transgender bill comes. The bill I had proposed to them that I got called horrible names for and they walked out over, they kept us on the floor for 12 hours, bringing amendment after amendment that took the original bill that spoke to birth certificates back to the bill I offered them. Didn't get one of them. Didn't get one amendment on. There was no negotiation whatsoever. So my whole point to telling you this, after all these special sessions and all the stuff we went through, the Democrats really shot themselves in the foot, because what I'm seeing around the state is whether you consider yourself a conservative or a liberal or somewhere in the middle, nobody wants to vote for a representative that's going to abandon their post at George Soros' expense for 15 minutes of fame. Nobody likes that. And I've seen it all over Austin, I've seen it all over Dallas, I've seen it all, and particularly all over the Panhandle, which none of your representatives did that. So I really think, ultimately, the Democrat Party are going to come up on the losing end of that. Now, all the special sessions weren't a total waste of time. I started this off by explaining redistricting to you. That's when that happened, because we weren't allowed to take it up until then. We were able to get more COVID relief dollars out into our districts and into the public where they could be used. So it wasn't a total waste of time, but about 90% of it was. And always remember this, your legislature's set up for 140 days every 2 years. That's a good thing. We'll file 7,000 bills during that regular session. We'll pass 1,200 of them. There are not 1,200 good ideas in Austin. And they're certainly not after 10 months. If you leave a bunch of us sitting in a room with nothing to do but pick on each other for 10 months, it gets decidedly worse. We were just having the conversation about coming down the line. Leave us there another 6 months and see what it looks like. It just gets worse. And so anyway, that's kind of the way the session went. From a wrap up of the regular session, we put a lot of money into a lot of things. There's $60 million went to supplemental special ed. We restored funding to the blind and visually impaired school. We put another $39.5 million into TRS care. Put another $464 billion into the foundation school program. Of course, there was a lot of pro-life that happened this time. The Senate Bill 8, which was considered the heartbeat bill, is in the Supreme Court now. It's the one that focuses on detection of a heartbeat, and after that, a woman can't have an abortion. Energy, talked about that. Rural development, House Bill 5 is probably the biggest bill of the session. I think it creates a state broadband development office. This office will be managed by the comptroller, and the goal of the legislation is to create an office within the state to streamline the relationship between the Fed and the state to draw down more dollars for rural broadband infrastructure. The infrastructure we're using for broadband now is the same infrastructure we created. So what's the reason that you're not on a party line out here or you're not sending smoke signals? That was created through the Universal Service Fund. But the infrastructure, the copper wires and exchanges we put in place during those days, they don't know if that signal is a broadband signal or if it's a voice signal or whatever. It all kind of works the same. But the more broadband we put down it, the less reliable it's going to be because it wasn't even created for this. So we have to have some infrastructure dollars. I think from a rural standpoint, that one is really good. A couple things I worked on myself this session. A lot of educators in this room. I think it's important to know, there's two reasons, whether you liked it or didn't like it, the virtual option existed, and schools were even allowed to open, and both of them were bills I passed. In 2013, I created the Texas Virtual School Network. In 2015, I changed 187-hour days to 75,600 minutes. Now, obviously, neither one of those pieces of legislation were built for a 100-year pandemic. It was built to give rural schools equal educational opportunities and schedule flexibility like big schools or charter schools have. That's why we did it. Now, when the pandemic happened, the commissioner had very little to work with that was statute. So he used those two pieces of legislation to hopefully keep your schools open. Problem with the virtual ed, not out here, in fact, rural schools performed way above the average. Urban schools, over half the kids that took the virtual option failed. It wasn't built for that. We weren't ready for that. So, but you know how the legislature works. When we get in there, and there's been a big buzzword for the last year, a lot of my colleagues think it's time to pass bills they don't know what they're talking about. So we had a lot of bills that called for, on the virtual school network, essentially taking the rattle off and kick hard. We're just going to let them do it. However, you're going to have to let every kid in your district take the virtual option. It's like when I was on the school board and we were doing dual credit, and our school board was actually paying for it. And then we figured out, well, we got a bunch of kids signing up for French that can't pass English. We got to quit. There's got to be some accountability here. Well, so some of these bills took all of that away from you. I mean, it's just going to, a kid walks in and they're not passing the way it is, and they're just going to tell you, no, you're going to give me all my classes virtually, and I'm going to sit at home. And we know that doesn't work. So I ultimately voted for a bill that technically, if a kid could truly jump through all the hoops, could take all their classes virtually. It's almost impossible to meet that standard. And the reason I went ahead and voted for it, even though I don't agree with that wholeheartedly, is I voted for it because you're going to have a virtual option from now on. The landscape's changed. We know it's going to happen, but what we had left out is funding. There was no funding mechanism. And if the governor or a new commissioner or whatever decides the waiver's over, you're going to have a bunch of kids you're educating virtually for that don't count towards your ADA. That's a bad idea, particularly when our numbers can get so tight in these small schools. So I went ahead and voted for a bill in a special session to make sure you get funded for the virtual option. But during a regular session, I created the commission to study virtual education. And it's going to be made up largely exactly like the committee that created House Bill 3 a couple sessions ago. It's going to have House members, Senate members, it's going to have school teachers, it's going to have tech people, it's going to have a whole bunch of everybody. And I sunset the legislation that did pass. It was Representative Bell's bill. I put a sunset date on it to force this commission to happen. And we are going to start it in January, and hopefully we come up with the best practices that works for everybody, and still remembers that local control is important. Because right now it's getting pretty spooky on what we may or may not do in that world. I also chaired the Committee on Culture, Recreation, Tourism. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but it's actually a really good committee, particularly for a rural member. It has oversight over the Historic Commission, the Commission on the Arts, Film Commission, Parks and Wildlife, all the state parks. My committee has purview over all of that stuff. If you haven't toured your state parks, if you ever get a chance, I haven't been to a bad one yet. This summer when we were stuck in Austin all summer, I'm not much of a golfer, so I can only play every once in a while before it frustrates me. So we spent a lot of our summer touring state parks. And, as chair of the committee, it was a good use of my time, and I was totally impressed. It's the only segment of our state that did not suffer under COVID. They actually made money because we could go anywhere else. And so the parks are full, the hunting and fishing filled up, and so that was a great committee. And it's from a bill standpoint. There's a lot of bills that come through there. Some of them are like the major event reimbursement fund. Those are the things that bring things like the NFR or the PBR finals or the drag racing championships to Texas, because the governor has a pot of money, and he has, if you pass a bill to put whatever event on the list, they have a chance to get some of their upfront costs reimbursed them, and it's billions of dollars. It's an economic driver. It doesn't particularly, you're never going to see the benefit of those things directly in Muleshoe, but every dollar that comes into the state coffers that don't come out of our residents' pockets, I'm for it. So anyway, there was those kind of bills we worked on. Last thing I'll tell you I worked on, it took me 6 years to pass this bill. You've all heard me talk about my mother passing away of ovarian cancer in 2013. Well, after 2013, my family and my friend Kyle Cassell's family, and particularly with my wife, created the KK125 Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation. And we've raised a lot of money and passed a lot of legislation to promote women's health under that. We've raised and given away right at $1 million. We've passed several pieces of legislation that make it easier for all cancer patients, but particularly ovarian cancer patients to fight this horrible disease. One of the things we did in 2015, I passed a bill that said a CA125, which was the only known blood marker or that used for the purpose of early detection of ovarian cancer, but it wasn't paid for in a well-woman exam. So we changed that law. We said a CA125 is going to be paid for in a well-woman exam as an insurable item. So if you have insurance and you go to your well-woman exam or your healthcare provider and you ask for this test, your insurance is going to pay for it. 2017 happened, well, by that time the medical community had created these other tests that weren't a CA125. They did the same thing, but I put CA125 in the statute. So I tried to change the legislation in 2017 to say any test that's FDA approved for the purpose of early detection of ovarian cancer can be paid for within a well-woman exam as an insurable item. It sounds pretty simple to me. The bill died a horrible death in 2017, and it also died in 2019. It did not die because it wasn't good policy, and it didn't die because it's not good for women to have early detection. It died because a certain senator was really mad at me and killed all my bills. That's okay. I killed a lot of his too. I've taken lots of Senate scalps since I've been there, which is what you send me down there to do. You don't want somebody that's going to go down there and just do whatever the governor tells me or let the senator bully me. That's just not, well, number one, it's not me. I wouldn't stay. But, so that's what happened. So my bill died for 6 years. And this particular senator, who has a beautiful wife and 3 beautiful daughters, I finally got it through to him that you got way too many ovaries in your house to be messing with Karma. You better pass my bill. You're the guy that's going to need an early diagnosis. And I'm telling you, when you're in that situation, you're looking at your loved one and going, God, if we had known 4 years sooner. You know, anyway, that's what the bill is about. I'm telling that story at all my town halls. I know Robin and Cinda are probably sick of hearing it, but here's the deal. I represent 17 counties currently. I'm working to represent 19 in the new district. I do a lot for in public ed. I do a lot on a lot of subjects. But, you know, farm and ranch, oil and gas, municipal issues, highways, you know, all the things that you're going to do when you represent such a large landmass as I do. But I do think it's been an interesting journey that women's health has become something that I work on, that I'm passionate about. Would have never known that if I hadn't gone to the legislature, and I never would have been able to affect that kind of change. So, you know, when you have a representative or a senator or whatever, you know, there's a lot of one-trick ponies down there. I think we need more people that can recognize, see a need, and you know, take care of that need, and you know, and listen for the opportunities that come our way, because there's something out there that needs done every day. So that was session. What do y'all want to talk about?
I'll start off. So on the redistricting, you ended up with Gaines County, is that right?
And Andrews.
And Andrews, and so was the superintendent from Canadian that went to Seminole involved in that?
No, but
he's happy.
He says he was happy.
Yeah, he's happy he got his representative back.
That's what he said. I hope he means it. We'll find out tomorrow or the next day when I'm down there.
I've got one that, first we appreciate you working through the 230 days that y'all spent up there. And there's the Senate Bill 1 that was in the third session. When we first heard about it, we thought that it was going to be like a 3.3 cent decrease in the M&O tax, and then maybe a 6.6, but it ended up going to conference committee when it went to the Senate. So I don't know if you were involved in that, but how did they come up with the $40,000 homestead exemption deal from going from the first just decreasing the M&O to changing to the $40,000?
Well, so that particular bill was Paul Betancourt's bill, and you know, Paul is he frankly thinks all schools have too much money, and he was the one that pushed for the property tax caps before, and this was an extension of that. That's what it was headed to be. I have to give Morgan Meyer credit, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, because when I went to him over the bill, I said, you know, you have to go back to House Bill 3 for this to make sense. So what we said in House Bill 3 is, okay, yes, we're going to make you compress your rate, but if you do these things, we're going to give you 2 more golden pennies. Well, then we came back in 2021 in a special session, and the Senate chair says, yeah, we told you that, but maybe we'll give them to you next time. That's what that bill was trying to do. It was trying to take your golden pennies, which is wrong. Golden pennies are worth a lot more than just your average penny, and it was our promise when we compressed your rate. You know, that's the thing. If we hadn't promised you, we're going to do this to you, but we're going to do this for you over here. Well, then he wanted to take the for you part away. So Morgan Meyer said, and when it got to Ways and Means, I had said, and a number of my Republican colleagues said, we're not doing that. We're not going home and facing our superintendents and our school personnel and saying, hey, you know, we did make you a promise last session, but we're going to take it away until another session. And so the bill was waning, the support was waning in the House. And so Morgan Meyer says, we got all these extra billions in COVID money. Let's give taxpayer relief. Just give every homeowner $40,000. That's better than this cap any day. That's kind of where it came from. Now, the negotiated version is the Senate wanted to take credit for it. It is not how it happened. Morgan Meyer came up with that idea as chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and I was in full support.
Great. Good. That's good.
I hope that made sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of a deep subject.
I appreciate your work on that. And your work on House Bill 3 a few years ago has been great help to
Good. Well, I know you got something to say.
Go ahead, Mr. Barrett's back there.
Okay.
I want to read just a quick paragraph out of this book.
Okay.
And you've touched on the subject, and this is about voting. It says, if it existed at all, this is talking about history and all the rest of it for many countries and all of history. Voting, if it existed at all, was not transparent, sacrosanct, or widespread. It still is not for over 3 billion people today. Even in so-called democracies, voting often operates under implied or direct coercion, usually in rigged and scripted elections. A sign of democratic sclerosis is a loss of confidence in the integrity of voting, to the point that it becomes seen as a futile exercise rather than a bulwark of citizenship. And so you've touched on it. You talked about voter suppression, and I am for voter suppression of dead people voting,
Oh, yeah.
and voting twice, and all those things. So, so I brought this book, and I don't know if you have it.
I'm listening to you, but my sinuses are killing me.
Okay.
He's gonna blow his nose open.
My nose is pouring. I'm sorry. The cotton gin is just. So
anyway, I don't know if you have this book, Victor Davis Hanson, The Dying Citizen.
I have not read it.
Okay. If I can get out of this. So it's an early Christmas present.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I
That's
read
really
that
good.
in a heart. Yeah, I've heard of it, but I haven't read it. Thank you. Well, as far as the voting goes, I mean, Texas has roughly 16 counts of alleged voter fraud right now from the last presidential election. Now I'm with you. Any's too much, but we're talking about 30 million people in the state of Texas, and we haven't proved any of these. I mean, I just heard that there was 16 alleged counts of voter fraud. We run really overall clean elections in Texas with a lot of integrity, particularly in our small rural communities. Now, there's a big push from some members of the Republican Party for us to go back for another called session to pass an election audit bill. Now, I want everybody in this room to understand that means two things. It means the state of Texas thinks you can't count, and it also requires me to vote for an unfunded mandate. Now, voting for an unfunded mandate is something that's been taboo since I got this job. Everybody from Lipscomb County to Yoakum County has said to me, you better not vote for an unfunded mandate. Well, that's what that is. Now, I agree. I think any election fraud's too much, and I do whatever I can to fix it. But I think every time you have a school board election or anything, you have to hire an outside auditor. That costs money, and the state of Texas is not going to pay for it. That's just a fact. So I think we have safe and secure elections. Is there ever any voter fraud? I think so. I had 5 cases reported to my office last election cycle, and I turned them into the state, and none of them were proved to be valid. There was somebody on Facebook saying, "Hey, I got to them. I voted twice or whatever," and I had them investigated, and we certainly didn't find any of that. And then the other thing they want us to go back for is the vaccine mandate. So, a year ago, Abbott nearly got in trouble because he tried to impose a mask mandate. He removed the mask mandate. Now, Biden wants a vaccine mandate, but Abbott wants a mandate to say we can't have mandates. I don't think any political party needs to be butting into my private business. Either way, I think so. Saying you're going to mandate something or saying you can't mandate something, it's ridiculous, because if, as a private business owner, if I ask my employees to get vaccinated and they tell me no, that's their right. They don't have to work for me. If my customers say, you imposed a mask or a vaccine mandate, we're not going to shop with you, that is completely their right. Now, my name's on that business, and so if a decision I make gets everybody sick and 20 people die, and you think the governor's going to come bail me out? No. He's going to say, I created a policy that put you in this box. Sorry for your bad luck. That is wrong. And it's wrong for any government official to stick their nose in a private business. I'm Republican as I can be, and I support Greg Abbott. I do not support that. And so calling me back for a fourth called session, if it's those 2 items on the agenda, I'm just not sure how helpful I can be.
Well, that's a perfect transition to my question. I just wanted to see what insider updates you had in regards to the federal government and the Head Start program and the mandates that we just received for masks and an upcoming vaccine mandate for students and staff.
I think I don't have an update for you. I know what you're talking about. I've seen the mandate, and once again, I think it's wrong. I think at some point this administration in DC is going to get enough pushback from places like Muleshoe, the flyover states, that they're going to start withholding funding if you don't institute their mandates. And I have just put my name on an amicus brief with the rest of my Republican colleagues that we sent to the Department of Justice and sent to the Biden administration, basically telling them we're joining the lawsuit if you don't back off these mandates. We're just going to have to see how it plays out, I guess, because I don't have an answer for you. I wish I did, but I think it's wrong as it can be, and you know what, I don't, and Head Start is hard too, because communities like you depend on Head Start, but I have other school districts that get no Head Start money. They throw those AYP standards in the trash because they're too property wealthy for Head Start to come in. But if you depend on it, and the federal government is going to manipulate how you educate kids when your neighbors don't have to do it, the whole thing's wrong. And if you have something you'd like me to pass on, an opinion or put something in writing, I'll be glad to put it on my letterhead.
Thank you.
So what do you see coming in the future that you think is going to be the biggest concern for Texas coming in the future, that based on the past legislative session, what do you think the biggest concern is?
On which subject? Just any subject?
Yeah.
I think we still have some real issues with our power grid, and for a number of reasons. I mean, we've built up this renewable energy myth to where it's 40% of our electricity grid. Well, the first thing that shuts off in a snowstorm is sunshine and wind.
Mm-hmm.
Wind doesn't blow when it's cold. When you get that kind of cold, then of course the grid or the solar panels all covered up with snow. I think we've demonized natural gas to the point that it's hard, and nuclear power. And then so we know we're going to have rolling blackouts where we're at today. But the two biggest industries coming into Texas right now that consume more electricity really than anything else we're doing is electric cars and data mining. Data mining consumes an ungodly amount of electricity, and that's Bitcoin, for those of you that didn't know that. And then the electric car thing. The city of Austin does not have enough electricity currently to put a light duty car charging station at the state capitol. There's not enough in the grid for that. So, but now we're moving Tesla to Texas. We've got Peterbilt says they're going to have an 18-wheeler, an over-the-road 18-wheeler out on the road by 2028. There is, other than the Holiday Inn in Amarillo and a place in Lubbock, there's no place to charge a light-duty car, much less a truck. I mean, I think the electric grid is truly the big issue of the state right now. And I know Governor Abbott has promised that the lights will stay on this winter. I hope he's right. We made a lot of strides to making sure that happens, but there's still a lot of problems.
What about in education?
I worry a lot. I told you last time I was here, my number one concern was this virtual option. I think it takes the ability of the teacher to teach away. Not that it's not a tool, not that it's not a good thing if you've got a child that can benefit from it, and a teacher that can, and school districts can collaborate on the issue. I see where it's great. But I can tell you as a parent, and I think probably don't agree with me, our kids learn just as much from the teacher they didn't like, the school bully, just the peer pressure of going to school than they ever did in the classroom. I mean, how are you ever going to function in this society if all you've ever done is push a button and get your way? I think it's wrong, and so I worry a lot a lot about that, and I killed a lot of bills this session that went too far on that issue. I did, like I said, I did have to vote for one, but I was able to sunset it, and frankly, I didn't see a way out, because you weren't going to get funded for what you're being forced to do if that bill didn't pass. And that was more important than dying on my sword when I thought I'd be there one more session at least to fix it through this commission.
Well, right now, if we have students that are out for COVID, we do the COVID, we label them, and we get funding. But you can only get 10%, only 10% of your students can be labeled for COVID and receive funding. Well, Muleshoe, I have 360
Right.
at my high school. I was already well over 5% in October. And so I've got to make it the rest of the year to receive funding on those students.
Right.
So that makes it a little
So I've heard
difficult
from-
as well.
I've heard from, in fact, another superintendent today on this same issue, because Commissioner of Education said he was going to give you the first 6 weeks to hold harmless, and then, but according to the soup that called me this morning, his problem is COVID didn't hit his community till the third 6 weeks. The first 6 weeks he had all his kids. Well, that's all done on a waiver anyway, and I encouraged him, and hopefully I'll find out more about it this week. I said, have you talked to TEA? Because I cannot imagine the Commissioner of Education holding your feet to the fire on that when it's a waiver. It's not a law or even a rule. I mean, this is at his discretion, and it's easy enough to say, all right, we're going to get to the end of the year and we're going to hold you harmless on your worst 6 weeks, whatever that is, whether it was 10% or whatever. And I think we can get there. I don't think that's a hard and fast. And that's what I told the superintendent who called me about this morning. And this is the second time I've heard it in a day, so evidently you are paying attention to it. So anyway, I asked him to go to TEA and get an answer before I called. Because if they tell him no, I want to know that before I call. And I don't want to go in there and stir something up and make it harder. I want to know what my opponent's going to say before I speak, is my point.
Representative King, I have a question for you.
Oh,
So
great.
we're moving away from ETS and Pearson and going to the Cambium system for testing, which is good. I think they've got some good features. The problem that we're having is, so we use release star tests to benchmark our kids and just kind of see what their progress is. But the way that Cambium is set up, we can't get the data for those benchmark tests from that testing platform. So is there a way is that something maybe you could, relay to the powers
Sure.
that be? That is something that would be very, very helpful for us if we could get the data for that benchmark, because that's what we use to really help our kids grow and inform instruction.
Okay. Yep. We will put that call in to TEA and find out why you're not getting that. I thought that was the whole point of the testing.
Well, that's what we thought too.
Okay.
It's listed as a practice test, but you don't get data on practice
That's
test.
not right. Oh, okay. But I mean, if they're not going to let you grade it, they ought to at least tell you how your kids did or what good to do.
Right. Yes, so that would be very helpful.
I got you. Okay. I'll do some asking.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Do you want me to contact you, or do you contact
Well,
just the
you
school?
can contact my boss.
Well, however, I mean, we don't mind, but if
Yes.
you want me to contact you directly, just make sure Cinda has your
Okay.
info, and I will find out
I appreciate
why
it.
you're not getting that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Have you heard very much discussion on the new Cambium system?
Not hardly a bit. Everybody's so tired of hearing about Pearson. It's like any name will do. We'll see how that goes. I think it's surely they can't be any worse. Than Pearson. I mean, Pearson couldn't even pull the test off. But I don't think we've actually had a STAR test that counted in 3 years. I mean, they made you do it,
Yeah.
but the computer crashed the last 2. I know.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I haven't heard a lot, but I'm sure I will. I'm sure from
We
you.
start next week.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to hear from you.
Yes, we start. Yeah, actually, that's right, tomorrow. I'm
Oh
a
my
week
gosh.
off, but tomorrow we start testing tomorrow.
Mm.
So.
That's
Now,
not.
there's been a few transition issues like uploading and doing some erasing and stuff, and I'm sure that will work out, but I was just wondering if other districts were having trouble with it.
Yeah, I haven't heard. And we did. don't know, 4 or 5 town halls last week, and then the time before we hit it was like at the very end of October. So this probably wasn't really on the front burner at that time. But I'm going to Region 17 Wednesday, so I'm sure that'll be topic of discussion. Nothing else? No?
I have another one. Nobody
Okay.
else does. What about the healthcare bill over the insulin? About there's one in here about the cost, if you have
Oh.
insurance.
Yeah.
That it's not, so I'm paying $260 a month in insulin for my son.
Uh-huh.
So talk about that healthcare bill that is going to,
Which bill number? I don't remember the bill, but
827,
827,
oh,
yes, Senate Bill, 827.
House Bill 82.
okay. Yeah, Senate Bill 827 though.
Yes.
Well, it's supposed to put a cap on your insulin costs.
That's what,
I mean, that's what
that's
the
the way
bill-
I read it.
I know that is what the bill is. Now, and it says it took effect in September, but you're not seeing this from your healthcare provider?
No, sir.
Or from your insurance company?
No, sir.
Huh.
That's why when I read that, I was like, interesting, because.
No, it's supposed to. That's what the bill was for. And you know, if you look at another one that did similar thing, it was House Bill 18, and you know what it was supposed to do is put a cap on drugs that were used to treat prostate cancer, and it passed too. So you know, both of those things should be in statute.
Okay.
I will find that out too.
Thank you.
You bet. One that, you know, it's funny. You can pass all the laws you want to, and insurance companies tend to do what insurance companies want to do. And if there's an insurance agent in here, I'm not trying to be offensive about just the insurance company is who I'm taking a shot at.
Well, I'm right there with you. I'm fed up with insurance companies.
Yeah.
I'm more than fed up with them.
Me too. Me too. It's the only thing. You know, it's funny in Austin. It seems like it's kind of cool to hate on the trial lawyers, you know, and I understand, you know, being in business that you don't want frivolous lawsuits and those kind of things, but man, those insurance companies, they're way worse. They make money on both ends of that deal.
Yeah. We've got an issue right now going on with United Healthcare, and there's going to be a considerable number of lives here in Bailey County that are not going to be covered because they won't contract with us, because we won't agree to accept less than what Medicare pays.
So what about, just out of curiosity, have you had that same issue out of Blue Cross or Baylor Scott and White?
Some with Blue Cross Blue Shield, but we have a little more leverage with Blue Cross Blue Shield just in the fact that they insure
Sure.
our hospitals. Baylor Scott and White, they hadn't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
I mean, they just haven't.
Okay. Because I'd heard that about United, but when I asked, I've heard that other places, and when I asked that question, it sounds to me like United's the only one that's doing that right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're trying to implement a process that we have to have our lab certified with them, even though we're already certified through CLIA and COLA and all the other certifications. They want us to be certified by them on top of that at our cost,
Yeah.
just so that they will pay us for any labs that we do for their insured. It just, yeah, United's out of control. Superior and Humana are, you know, Superior. So if we have somebody with Superior Medicaid come into our ER, and it's a true emergency room visit that, you know, it may end up being a $5,000 bill, they will pay us $70. Period.
Wow.
Period.
That's just it.
That's it.
It's getting tougher all the time, isn't it? But I'll certainly, if you've got something a letter or something you'd like me to weigh in on with this United, I'll be glad to help you with it.
Yeah, it's just, we just feel like we feel like United is just saying, we don't really care about the number of lives you have there in Bailey County because it's not that many. And it's like, but these are lives that you guys take their money and they deserve to have health care
Exactly.
without having to go to Lubbock to do a regular visit.
I agree.
To them it's no big deal. To us in our community, it's a huge deal. And then we're made out to be the bad guys because they're telling them, well, they just won't contract with us. Yeah, we won't contract to take nothing. No.
Right, right.
So, anyway.
Well, give me, if you have, so like I say, if you have something something in writing or something you'd like me to pass on from my office on that subject, I'll be glad to work with you on it.
Okay.
We all agree that there's lots of reasons to live in Texas, and that's evident by the influx we're having from other states and things. So we know we've got a good government we can respect here, and our voting, I feel fairly strongly that it has a lot of integrity. But Texas ranks as one of the top 5 states of all states in property tax rates. What would be your position on something to come in and actually reduce property taxes, reform it, get away from the property tax system, not to an income tax, but move away from that property tax being such a levy on all the citizens here where we really can't ever own our home. We're paying rent on it.
I don't disagree with you. The other states that you're talking about that have less property tax or no property tax either have an income tax or
But
some.
there's the highest tax rate, the highest property tax rate. Texas is one of the top 5.
Exactly. And all of those that are lower have some other kind of tax that keeps their property taxes low. Now, what can you do to truly alleviate property tax in the state of Texas? Most of the property tax that the state gets comes in the form of schools. I mean, there is no statewide property tax unless you talk about property wealthy school districts. And so the amount of money that comes to the state in the form of general revenue, that's property tax, and property taxes continue to climb as the cost of education goes up. Constitution really speaks to the state paying for free public education. We're about 46% of the cost. If you want true property tax relief, there has to be another revenue source that gets the cost of education on the state's back over 50%. One thing I've proposed that would do that is wind, nuclear, solar, and coal. They're subsidized at every level, and they don't pay one dime into the education system. They don't. The 4.8% tax on a barrel of oil before it ever comes out of the ground, 2.5% on an MCF of natural gas before it ever comes out of the ground, goes straight to the coffers, and most of that ends up in public education. These other energy providers don't pay anything. So what I proposed is you can't charge those producers in the form of severance tax because severed, as defined in the law, speaks to being severed from the ground. But what we did do is figured out a formula to basically charge those energy producers 1 cent per kilowatt hour they produce to the producer, because you got to remember they can't pass that rate increase along to the taxpayer unless the legislature passes a bill and lets them. They don't get a rate increase, so this is on the producer. 1 cent would yield $6 billion annually, $12 billion. So really more than that. So you're somewhere around $12 to $15 billion a biennium. If that was a dedicated funding source to public education, your property taxes go down dramatically and immediately. So public ed is the only constitutional check we write. It's 78% of the budget. The Constitution says we will have a session 140 days every 2 years, and it says we shall provide free public education. Article 7. That's all the Constitution really requires us to do. So if you want property tax relief, go by the letter of the law of the Constitution and come up with a revenue source to pay for the rest of public ed, and your property taxes are going to go down.
So was that proposal presented in the 87 legislature?
Oh, I filed the bill.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And I filed it in the 86 and the 87. And in fact, I really thought we had traction for it in the 87th legislature, but what happened to it was I filed the bill November of 2020, and the green energy folks, or the renewable energy folks, or whatever, they really came after me for it. That I hated the environment and all this stuff, and which is frankly not true. I just think everybody should pay their share. And so, anyway, we got into session, and I was talking to the governor's office about this bill that they knew I was bringing, because after we did House Bill 3 and we put $11.5 billion additional into public ed, we all talked about it at the time. General revenue had the money to pay for that in 2019, but by 2021 to 2023, when the bills really start coming due, we're going to have some revenue, or we're going to be right back to 35% of the cost of public education, and property taxes skyrocketing again. Everybody agreed on that. So I took the bullets for this. I filed the bill. Well, right at the beginning of the session, I'm kind of excited. I'm going to carry this big bill. We're going to have this big fight. That's what I got sent down here to do. And the governor's office said, "Oh yeah, we're not doing that anymore." I said, "What do you mean we're not doing it anymore?" He said, "We have billions of dollars coming in from the federal government. We don't need it." And he's right. We didn't, but we will at some point. I mean, and policy changes take a long time. So yes, I mean, I'm with you. But if you want your property taxes to reduce significantly without a statewide income tax or something like that, you got to pay for what's consuming them somehow. And that's public ed. And if you like it or don't like it, I mean, it's the Constitution. We have to change the Constitution if we're going to quit doing that. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. And recognizing that schools, counties, cities are a branch of the state government, actually. I mean, that's why they are funded and taken care of and regulated by the Constitution and the legislature.
All right, Cindy says I have to go now. Thank you all for coming. Always appreciate it. And thank you for the book. I appreciate that.